Good morning and welcome to Brandenburg News Network. I am Donna Brandenburg, and it's the 19th day of December 2024. And happy anniversary to me today. It's my anniversary, or our anniversary. So today we're going to just be able to celebrate that, which is fun. So there's a lot going on out there. I say it every day because there is. But today, I think this is going to be a wonderful show because Shawn Starry is back on today with some more discussion on drones and radiation and the nuclear threat. I think we really have something here, guys, that we're going to have to look into. I'm going to bring Shawn on right now. And morning, Shawn. How you doing?
Good morning. How are you?
Doing good. So I'm trying to get a hold of Christina, our buddy, who is up in the, let's just say, the high radiation zone right now, and she is not feeling well. She's sick. So we're all a little concerned for her because it appears that there is a nuclear threat or some sort of a threat or something going on. But you looked up the radiation charts to see what was really happening. Am I correct?
Yes, that's right.
So do you want me to put up the screenshots, or where do you want to go with this first? Because we're going to talk about drones, and you do have quite a bit of information and experience with that. So I want to talk to people about what's real today with the drone threat, the nuclear warhead threat, and the radiation threat. Do we want to start with the nuclear warhead threat to lay a foundation here?
Yeah, sure. Actually, if we can start with the drones first.
Radiation threat. Sure, we could do that. With the nuclear warhead. There we go.
If we can start with the drones first and kind of give people a little bit of an educational background about drones, how they work. And
do you want me to bring them up? That I'll bring them up right now.
Sure.
Hang on a second. And you tell me which one you want to go through. I'll go through them very quickly, and then we will. Do you want to start here, or do you want to start with?
We can start with that one.
That one. All right, let's go start at the end here. Hang on. Oh, there's my video today, guys. So there you go.
Okay, so what you're seeing here is a guide to military drones. Now, the very first image there, or I should say, very first video that I saw that came out on TikTok and on X, that showed that a drone that crashed on the highway there in Pennsylvania.
Right.
That particular drone was a Global Hawk RQ-4. Now, this particular drone has the capabilities to sniff for nuclear, biological, and chemical weapons. It's also outfitted with what they call the LiDAR camera, which actually be able to penetrate the ground. I think it's up to 2 miles.
2 miles in the ground, seriously?
Yeah, the LiDARs are extremely powerful. They can actually, you can use LiDAR equipment to pretty much see in kind of like layers below the ground. You can actually see shapes and dimensions and things like this. So, give you an example, like let's just say there was a nuclear warhead missing in the back of somebody's van, and it was driving down the highway, and this thing picks up the radiation that's coming from it. Well, this thing is also going to use a LiDAR camera, and it's going to look into, like an X-ray machine, is going to look into the vehicle, and it's actually going to see the shaping of that nuclear warhead, right? So they would know, that this particular vehicle is carrying, say, a missing nuclear warhead, for example. This thing is so powerful, and so potent, that this also can be oftentimes they're outfitted with a high-powered weapon, which is an all-weather capability high-powered weapon, whereas it shoots out a laser, and this particular laser can completely disable a vehicle. It can penetrate buildings. It can even do where, let's say, they have to take out some soldiers, in a battlefield, that these can actually target these soldiers. And for every time it uses one of these high-power weapons, lasers, it only costs like 2 cents. And that's how
really
cheap.
How far can they penetrate into, say, like the ground or into a building or something with these lasers?
I don't know the depth of how far they can actually penetrate, but I know it's enough that they can actually they can melt an engine. Okay. I know this because of the investigation I did with the Panhandle Documentary while I was down there in Texas. And we were investigating some of the locations. We investigated some of the vehicles that were burnt up. These particular vehicles were not near buildings, but you can see that point of entry with the laser had hit it. And they can get up to 2,200 degrees, which is pretty much at the melting point of what a lot of the metals that are on the vehicle. So we know that aluminum can melt at, I think it's 1,400 degrees. And we've seen a lot of melted aluminum bumpers, for example. So these lasers can do a lot of damage. They can actually completely disable any kind of vehicle, pretty much, unless it's hardened with some kind of a military hardening shell on it. These things can pretty much take out. They can also take out missiles as well. They can take out drones. So this is like the top of the line military drone, I guess. This is roughly about the same size as a Cessna airplane. So it's not exactly small, but it's not exactly really big either. And these had and on this here, so the maximum flight time is like 32 hours or more. And this is also so kind of understand how drones are. There's two types of drones. There's what they call the direct line of sight, which is a lot of your hobbyists will fly. And then there's also what they call the beyond the direct line of sight. And that's where they have like a laptop computer. They operate everything off the laptop, but it's also got an AI processor chip in it. So what they do is they put in all the coordinates that they need to go to. And then while it's flying, the person that is operating it can focus on what it is that they're looking at, or focus on what tools that are on board to be able to utilize these tools, whether it's the cameras or whether it's a direct energy weapon or whether it's the NBC snippers or the LiDAR camera. So it's kind of almost like hands-free, basically. Yeah, it's pretty impressive. And again, this is like $131.4 million just for one of these.
Wow. And it weighs like 6,800 kilograms. And what powers that? Do you know what's the power source for running this? What does it run on?
As far as I know, that's classified. The public doesn't have that information.
I'd like to know. I like all these engineering things and the power sources for things, but I get it.
But this is, I mean, what I do know is basically built with the jet propulsion system. So as far as the fuel itself, I don't know. I can speculate. I don't think it's going to be jet fuel, but I think it's probably maybe natural gas, like those little natural gas canisters. If you go to the next picture, I'll show you what I mean by that. This here is what they call the Stalker UAV. This is engineered by Lockheed Martin. Just underneath the wing there, and the main part of the body, they actually have these little canisters that are filled with natural gas. So it's natural gas powered. That's what that fuels it. I guess they call them the fuel cells. And they're tremendously easy to replace. The wings only have 4 screws that can be tightened by hand. So you can just untighten them, kind of just move the wing back a little bit, pop out the canister, pop in a new canister, put the wing back on, screw the 4 bolts back in, and this thing is operational again. So a
little different than like an SR-71 or something.
Yeah. Well, that's the funny thing is that what a lot of people don't understand is drones can be completely undetectable. Now they do have your more traditional drones that you have, they usually give off what they call the RF frequency. There's 3 types of communications for each drone. One is RF, which is radio frequency. That's the most common one that you're going to find. Then you're going to get into cell communication, which is like T-Mobile had a contract with Lockheed Martin. I think it was for like $8 million. This was back in November last year. So they wanted to do an operational test flight with the Stalker drone on a cellular communication rather than RF signals. Now, the third one is satellite capabilities. Now, I do know that they're getting to the point where this is going to be available to the general population because you can run your drones on Starlink. So if you have the Starlink capabilities hook up to that drone, you can fly that without having to worry about interruptions. But some of these more advanced drones that they're coming out, they're going to have all 3 features of communication, which means there'll be no disruption. If one gets disrupted, say the RF frequency, you'll jump right into the cellular side of it. And if that is disrupted for whatever reason, there's the Starlink. So, but they're getting to be more and more advanced as they go along. They're able to fly longer, greater distances. They have AI software now integrated into it. But the military, what's interesting is that Lockheed Martin Skunk Works and Raytheon are the top 2 companies. And they have been selling these drones to China from 2002 to 2006. China found out that Raytheon had a contract with the U.S. government to sell drones to them. So they placed sanctions on Raytheon. Well, Raytheon didn't care because at that point, their contract was already up. They've already gotten the money. So they started selling them to the U.S. military as well.
Doesn't it seem like kind of a conflict?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, is it just me, or am I sitting here thinking the first thing comes to my mind is that Raytheon needs to be shut down because they're traitors and they were selling military drones to China?
Yeah, and it's not just to China, but they've been selling them to United Kingdom. They've been selling them to India. They've been selling the parts anyway. I know Russia has been buying parts from them as well. So far as the technology goes, just about every major superpower country actually has access to that technology, whereas the United States is not the only one that has that. So that's why we're seeing drone wars going on right now, where there's this huge competition between us and Russia. What's going on in Ukraine? They're utilizing these drones. Everything from the Hornet size, which is about the size of a cigarette lighter. They're really, really small. They're very versatile. They got cameras on them. And a lot of times they give them to special operators. They're going in, for very target specific missions. The drone operators will have them with them. Usually the guy that does the communication, and he'll pop it open, turn it on, he'll start flying. He's got a little screen, an LED screen on the front of his controller. He can actually see, he can get the drone right up into somebody's house and fly it up into the ceiling and just kind of hover down and scan the area and count how many hostiles they are, or there's a hostage situation. These drones can get into like very, very small spaces. But when you get into more of the bigger drones, like what we see here with the Global Hawk, for example, we know that they have the nuclear, biological, chemical weapon sniffers, so they can actually sniff any type of radiation that's been given off. We also know that these things aren't cheap. but we do know that one of them did crash in New Jersey, or I should say in Pennsylvania. I've been following this, very, very, very closely. I've been actually, I've gone online, and I've actually, there's a website, and this particular website will show you exactly what the rad level readings, the most recent ones that they put out, and it's not well known to the public. It's there. It's just they don't spend a lot of money marketing this information to people, but you can find it, and it's going to tell you what the rad level is. I believe that the military drones that are sniffing are giving out that information for the website, but it's not every piece of information. What they do is they kind of like hand select certain cities. You can't just type in like, okay, this is where I want to see what readings are there. But they'll give you a pre-select of the cities. And in this particular case, I've been kind of scouring all the cities, kind of seeing what the rad level readings are. So I had actually gone and found the one that was in New Jersey.
What's the website for that?
So the website is, let me pull it up here real quick.
I like to hear links.
Okay, if you go to radnat dot epa dot gov, and once it pops up, and then you can go through.
Is it RadNet or RadNat? Is it NAT or NET?
NET.
Okay.
.epa.gov.
All right. Let me see if I can put this up while we're doing this so everybody can see what we're doing here. I love on the fly research. Okay, so there it is. EPA. Okay. And now what do I do?
So then what you want to do is you want to click on measurement, start time, the first one here, the fixed columns. Go down to measurement, start date time, and then click on that, and then you're going to click on measurement and date time. Then you want to click on dose equivalent rate.
Okay.
Okay. So then go ahead and scroll down. Then you're going to find fixed monitor location. So these are kind of all preset locations. So you can, let's just say like New Jersey, for example.
Okay, so we've got Edison, New Jersey.
Yeah, so Edison, New Jersey. And then so this is pretty close to Pennsylvania. This is in particular the drone activities that have been going on in the New Jersey area. So all the big hype and all the so-called UAP, UFOs, everything that the internet has exploded with, these drones, the vast majority of it's taking place in New Jersey. So then on start date, if you go, let's say 12/10.
Okay.
Okay. And then you can have that as the end date, and then you click on submit. Okay. And then when you scroll down, this location is Edison, New Jersey. Okay, so this is what you're seeing right here is the measurement start date and time, which we know is on the 10th. So on the 10th and the 11th here, right? So it gives you the end date, but then at the end it says dose equivalent rate, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so if you take a look at these numbers, it's 50, 52, 52, 57, 59. Let's just say on average about 50 to 55, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So if you go to the next one that I sent you is the dose equivalent rate for exposure.
Okay, just a minute. Let me go back to that screen. Go back to my little drone screen here. And we'll go back to there. There we go.
Okay, go one more. Can you go back one more? Do you have that?
I think so.
Okay, here it is. So the rating MSBH, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So if you want just to kind of a baseline, your highest safe level before you get into elevated, that's 0.001, okay?
Okay.
Now, what we saw was about an average between 50 and 55, right?
Right.
So we go up, and when you get to 1, just 1, it says high danger, evacuate immediately. And 100 is severe radiation poisoning. So the reading is right in between 1 and 100, which is about 50 to 55. So it's beyond the point of you should be evacuating that area right now. Everybody should be evacuating that area. Now, as far as how far out this radiation that's in the air, we don't know. We just know that in Edison, this is what the readings are, which is about between 50 and 55. So everybody in Edison should be evacuating Edison, okay? Because right now they're not just at risk of being exposed; they are being exposed. Just like our good friend Christy went out there, and she was about 12 miles from Edison, and she started exhibiting symptoms, cold-like flu symptoms, bleeding nose. 1 minute she's got the cold, the shakes, the cold sweats. 5 minutes later, she's fine. And then 10 minutes later, she feels like she has no energy at all. These are all classic symptoms of what radiation poisoning looks like. But the only way for sure is that she would have to get her blood test done to find out exactly how much radiation ionizing that's in her blood, how much her body's actually saturated it. But she is taking potassium
Iodine?
yes, thank you, potassium iodine tablets. And I told her as soon as she called me and told me about it, I said, start taking 2, take 2 now, and I would take 1, every 1 or 2 hours, or whatever the directions say on the bottle, and then get to a doctor right away. But
preferably not in the area she's in.
Yeah. So she had left the next morning and decided she was going to head back home. She wasn't feeling well. And then, of course, when you get this reading, this actual reading on here, it tells us that this is a very serious, very, very, very serious. Everybody that is in that particular area is exposed, right? So, I mean, you guys, I'm not sure if you remember, but Trump put out a tweet and he was saying, if you're in Bedminster, New Jersey, get out of that area,
No. I'm looking here I'm looking for the other dates here because it got up to 60 in that area. Let me see if I can see what day it was that it was at 60. This is a little funky. It doesn't automatically
and it fluctuates. I mean, it fluctuates, between like 48 or 47 all the way up to 60. So it fluctuates, but that tells me.
Why is it fluctuating is the question.
Well, that's a good question. Is, if it's fluctuating, then that tells me that whatever's causing that radiation, it's still there. It hasn't left. It's
Well,
whatever
it's
it is
going up.
in that area.
It's gone up today. Look at, we're at 66.
Okay, so looks like to me it's elevating,
It
which
is.
means those chances are there's a leak there. Now, do we know if there's any nuclear power plants in that particular area? I don't think so, but let's take a look.
So bear with me a minute. I want to see what happens. I'm going to go back here and see if I can go to, just because I'm curious. I want to see what my area looks like right now. Now you got my curiosity up. You know what's going to happen here, Shawn? I'm going to be on this thing all day.
Is that?
It's like, happy anniversary, honey. Let's go look for radiation. To my husband.
Make sure you got the NBC suits and the Geiger counter.
Yeah.
And some potassium iodine tablets.
Yeah, do something here. All right. Oh, we're 50. Yeah, we're here too. Check it out.
Okay, so there's no nuclear power plants near that area. So we can scratch that off.
65 on the 12th.
Okay, it looks like to me it's that radiation level is rising, which tells me that there is a leak. I will kind of explain a little bit about no, hypothetically speaking, if there is a nuclear warhead there. Okay, I kind of just did a little like a grok question on Axe.
Mm-hmm.
But this is something I already know. I said, if a nuclear warhead was stolen by someone with very little knowledge of its maintenance, several factors would come into play regarding its detectability by drone-based nuclear, biological, chemical weapon sniffers, especially those designed for radiation detection. So this is what it shows on Grok. It says radiation leakage, the shielding. So even without maintenance, nuclear warheads are typically encased in heavy shielding to contain radiation. However, if the shielding is damaged, compromised, or if the warhead's integrity is breached, there could be some radiation leakage. This might not happen immediately, but if the warhead remains intact, but it can occur over time due to mishandling, So there's a natural decay in radioactive material inside, like uranium or plutonium, but they're always decaying. It's emitting radiation. So with good shielding, some gamma radiation still might escape, although at very, very, very low levels. But if the war is intact, so the detectability by drones, the sensitivity of the detectors, drone embassy sniffers equipped with radiation detectors, such as using Geiger-Müller counters, sensitization detectors, or high purity uranium HPGE detectors. They can detect it, So the big thing that people need to understand is when they send up a global hawk into that area, sniffing with the NBC sniffing in America, that's because they're more than likely there's going to be, especially there's, which I just found out on Google, there is no nuclear power plant in that area, and very, very rarely will they ever have to send that up over a nuclear power plant, because oftentimes nuclear power plants, they have, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission that comes in, they do inspections. They've got some of the smartest people that deal with this on a daily basis. So the chance of nuclear power plants leaking, it's pretty slim, but it does happen. However, we know there's no nuclear power plants there. So the only other plausible explanation is either there was a massive earthquake there, which opened up the ground, and there's oftentimes you can find uranium under the ground. It's in the rock and the soil sometimes, but that's pretty far down. So we know there wasn't an earthquake there that opened up the ground. So the third plausibility is the only one that can be pretty self-explanatory, is there's a missing nuclear warhead that's missing. Now, I talked to my confidential sources, and what I understand is that back in around January, we had 120 nuclear warheads that were sent to Ukraine. And the gentleman that is in the Army that actually handles those, he does daily maintenance, inspections, all that good stuff.
Keep going. I'm going to be listening. I have to do something. I'll be right back, but keep going. I'm listening.
Okay. He had noticed that 60 of them went missing, right? So right away they started getting onto their computer system, because those nuclear warheads have trackers in them. They were able to effectively track it to see where these nuclear warheads went to. And all they know is that they made it to America. But once they got to America, somebody there knew about the trackers and was able to take the trackers out. But after that point, they have no idea where the 60 nuclear warheads went missing. Now, my confidential source told me, said this particular Army sergeant, I think that's what his ranking is. I don't quote me on that, but he had gone to Congress behind closed doors, had a meeting with the congressional members, letting them know that they had a problem, that there were 60 nuclear warheads that were missing in the United States. And if that's the case, that story is literally lining up, with everything that we're seeing, with all of the reasons why. Number one, they would be sending up a military drone with the NBC sniffers on it over American soil, is if there's an imminent danger. If there's if there's nuclear, biological, or chemical weapons that have either been stolen or about to be deployed. We do know the FBI do have the Global Hawk. They have access to that as well. But we do know that, law enforcement, okay, so the FBI, we know the CIA has them as well. We also know that the military has them. So any other entity that were trying to purchase a Global Hawk, for example, they wouldn't qualify simply because they're not an agency that's within the government. Now, NGOs, major corporations, they can purchase them, but with exceptions where they're not, they may not be allowed to have certain components, but doesn't mean they can't put those components in by themselves.
That's messed up, because I hate to say it, but it's like the NGOs was one of the ways they were cheating the elections. I'm really concerned about this.
Yeah.
Should I be? I mean, sounds like a bad plan to me.
Well, I can tell you that the NGOs, they are the ones that own the military contracting side of the world. So oftentimes military contractors will have access to these drones. They purchase them, they buy them, they give them to the military contractors. They use them out. They don't use them in Iraq. They use them in Afghanistan. And of course, from my investigation with the Panhandle, we do know that the Global Hawk RQ4 was actually used to set the fields on fire. We also know that the military, the new airplanes that they have, is also outfitted with a high power weapon, which is all weather capability laser system. We actually got footage of that. We also put that into the documentary as well, showing that actually was the start of the Texas fire. So they lit up the field on fire on purpose. Then we found out from our investigation later, the NGOs started sending their buyers to come in and to do predatory buying, to buy up the land from people while they're emotionally in distress for 3 times the amount of the value of the land. Which doesn't really help anybody other than the NGOs, because it's driving up the housing marketing prices when they're buying it 3 times over the value. But they're also essentially buying the land because we know that they're looking for the lithium, the cobalt, the uranium. They're looking for those minerals. And in order for them to be able to secure that, they actually have to have ownership of title of the land, and they would also have the mining rights as well. So we see this a lot, like what's happened in Lahaina. We've seen this in California, Canada, the Utah Basin, which is the largest lithium deposit in the world. So I suspect that in this particular case, we see a lot of radiation that's going on, which is far above acceptable levels for a human being, which is massively concerning. Why the FBI, why the government's not coming out and telling people is because they don't want to start a widespread panic. But honestly, they should have been taking some kind of action in the earlier days, a month or 2 months ago, when they know that they detected the radiation, high levels of radiation in the area to begin with. And they should have come in and said, okay, talk to the mayor and said, we need to evacuate the town. We need to get everybody out for their safety. We need to take them to this location. We need to have National Guard set up. We need to start, testing them for radiation poisoning. And if they are positive for radiation poisoning, then we need to get them treated as soon as possible. What people don't understand about radiation poisoning is that it affects your body at a cellular level, and it starts to break it down. And eventually, you just end up with internal bleeding that the doctors can't stop. So you can suffer permanent damage or even dying from it. So all this time that they've been absolutely silent. But the news reporters are not asking the right questions. They're not doing their job. They're not investigating.
They never do they? They never ask the right questions.
So that's my big concern right now, is for the people that are in that area. How far out does this radiation go? I have no idea. Depending on what it is, if it is indeed a stolen nuclear warhead, and if it's just sitting in one area, say sitting in a warehouse or something, covered up with a blanket, then I would almost say, they should have found it by now. I think that they're trying to find them all at once. But we're also seeing it's not just in New Jersey. We're also seeing this on the West Coast as well. We're seeing it down in the Texas area as well.
It's in Michigan. When I looked at Grand Rapids, we had 66 at one point there in the last few days.
Yeah. So it sounds like to me the numbers are kind of matching up with the number of nuclear warheads that my confidential source told me that went missing. And with the amount of radiation detections and drones that are, people are reporting, it seems to be lining up. So that kind of leads me to the only conclusion that I can think of, where I want to call it, it's not, I'm not going to say a false flag event, but it's more like a black swan event. And as we all know, that the Central Intelligence Agency actually has a partnership with Hollywood. I think it's called SCAA or CSS or something like this. And what they basically do is they take classified documents and turn them into scripts, and they essentially give it to Hollywood, and then Hollywood makes a lot of movies out of it. And oftentimes, or sometimes, it's more like a precursor for the public. Critical thinkers like myself, we see this and we go, okay, this is a map, and this gives us, okay, what are some of these key points that we see in this movie or this television show. Now, for other people, it's meant more as to desensitize them. So if an event does occur, that does happen, it's going to happen much later down the road. It could be 20, 30, 40, 50 years down the road. And anybody who's ever watched that TV show or that movie that's still alive to that day, when the event happens, they're going to be like, oh, yeah, I remember they made a movie about this, or they made a TV show about this. And in this particular case, this is what kind of got me concerned is there's a TV series called Jericho. And basically, there is the character who was a Secretary of State or Secretary of Department or something like this. And he represents the deep state. And he sets in motion where what had happened was they were in conflict with Russia in Ukraine. There was missing nuclear warheads, which got brought back to the States. They were put into 60 major cities. All but one detonated. And we got this undercover FBI guy and this former military contractor pilot end up working together. They're in the same town called Jericho, Kansas. And it shows how everybody's struggling, trying to adapt to everything that's been going on. And then they find out on the West Coast in Seattle that this Secretary of State pops up and he says, I'm the new president of this new government, which is basically the whatever you want to call it, but without the Constitution. And so he tries to rally all the other 49 states to join him. But then the regular government pops up and says, no, you're in breach of the Constitution. You can't do this. Well, it gets to a point where it's almost a stalemate, and Texas is the deciding state which government is going to eventually, be the government that's going to take over, right? And so these two gentlemen end up taking the last nuclear warhead and they fly it down to Texas, and they manage to get it to the governor, and they show him that this former Secretary of State is the one that had stolen these nuclear warheads and detonated them in 59 different cities. And we have the evidence. We have the smoking gun. It's right here. It's completely disabled. It's not going to harm anybody. But here it is. Here's the proof. Here's the proof in the pudding. And the script, the original script was actually supposed to extend from there. They were supposed to have like two more seasons to it. But this is where it shows you America's embroiled in a new civil war because of this. And so we've got Texas and pretty much the other, half of the country against the western half. So and this seems like, to me, this is like a precursor to the TV series Jericho. All the signs are there. So why is there radiation levels that are high in all of these areas? At the same time, we have military drones, like the Global Hawk, for example, that's been spotted. And as far as my tracking is 34 cities.
We had a Predator drone go over our barn right before we had an event that Rick Grinnell was at. It was like a couple of days before that several people saw fly over. Okay. And they were freaked out by this. They were freaked out, the split tail, the whole 10 yards. And
if they're flying them at nighttime, that tells me.
Oh, this was right during the day because I was there.
Okay.
which is odd all in of itself. I mean, why would they be flying over my barn at that point in time? You know, I guess the question comes down to is, are the good guys in control or the bad guys are in control? Because that is always the question.
That is. And
what are the intent? Because I mean, I hate to say it, but the integrity of not just our government officials, but the American people right now has been so compromised that people don't even realize that they've been sucked into something that's incredibly evil, and they participate in this. You know, it's you always got to be asking questions, and sometimes you sit next to somebody just to find out what they're doing and infiltrate a little bit. But the reality is you've got to be able to discern the difference between good and evil, and what the intention is, or what the outcome is or could be.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot of critical thinking. It takes a lot of prayer. It takes a lot of research. You just don't walk into stuff like that blindly. You have to stop and say, well, we've got conflicting information here. Guess I'm not going to jump on the crazy train yet. I'm going to, keep my head in the game here and think and that sort of thing. But I understand why the Black Swan events predicted. We have one that's predicted for sure. Why that is so concerning to a lot of people.
Yeah.
It's the American people and their responses that will take the nation either in a good direction or a bad direction. And as freaking crazy as everybody is right now, not able to cope. You know what I heard? Like I think it's half of our young people are on antidepressants.
Mm-hmm.
They aren't coping with what they're seeing. And if things melt down, it is not like it's going to magically get better.
No, and it's gonna take decades. It's going to take decades of recovery. If you just imagine somebody who was a sexual abuse survivor, it takes them, decades to be able to recover from that abuse. Or say you have a veteran who has post-traumatic stress disorder or CTPTSD. It takes them decades. They don't, a lot of times folks don't fully recover from it, and when we've got NGOs and we have our government attacking the American people, setting fields on fire, setting houses on fire, destroying the chicken plants. We have 1,900 chicken plants in the last 8 years have been destroyed. We've got
1,900?
1,900 chicken plants, yeah.
Wow.
And then we got ranches that have been destroyed. We've got Texas, for example, they lost 2 million acres of grassland. And we have a lot of production plants, food production, processing plants. I think there's somewhere around the numbers. I might be wrong. Don't quote me, but I think the number is from last time I seen was about 6,000 food processing plants have been destroyed. 2 of them mysteriously planes crashed into them. Okay. There were other ones that, they just caught on fire.
You're a pilot, right?
I'm a drone pilot.
You're a drone pilot. Okay.
Yep.
So yeah, when you start looking at that, I believe that the number is 7 out of 10 plane crashes are actually assassinations.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they use airplanes as a weapon in and of itself, because they can take over the controls. Make no mistake about it. I have a very good friend who is a pilot, and the assessment with this person said that they really don't need a pilot to land any plane anymore, which tells me they can take the controls over. Someone can remotely fly those airplanes.
Yeah, so, you can actually set up the little Cessna with the proper equipment, but essentially you have an AI system where you can fly it just like you do with your drones.
Or Tesla has the same thing, where you can basically put in your end coordinates, and as long as you keep your hand on the wheel, it'll take you there. You don't have to do a thing.
Right. The technology today has gotten so far advanced that it's made things a lot more easier, convenient. But at the same time, it's not very hard to write a program that you can put into, a drone, which a lot of drone operators know this, but when you're doing what they call beyond a line of sight, you can get you have a program that comes with it, and if you're flying it, on an RF frequency, they have little satellites that you can get. There's little towers, portable towers. Set them on top of your vehicle or your van or whatever, and you can fly them beyond direct line of sight, or you can get the cellular capabilities as well, or you can even get the satellite. You can hook it up to Starlink, which is a pretty cheap way of doing it, and you can say, okay, I want you load that drone up with say combustible materials to begin with. You fly that into a building. Okay. Well, the thing is that a lot of these drones, usually they're outfitted with a transponder on them. Now, the thing is that a lot of times these drones fly under 500 feet. Now, like when I got my license, they have two types of license. You have the exhibitionists, or the novice. You're just flying them for fun. You're usually either direct to line of sight, you can see where it's going, or maybe you have a little camera like an LED screen on your controller. So you're hands on all the time. You're not flying it, beyond the line of sight, but maybe in kind of some areas, like assessing flood damage or something.
I have one of those. I've got one that'll fly over a mile out, and it's got the little camera on it, and you can record, you can do all that sort of thing. I don't use it much, but it's a fun thing to do.
Yeah, it is. But it's the rules kind of generally say that you can't fly above 500 feet in airspace, because anything over 500 feet is what they call commercial airspace. This is where you're getting into your airplanes, helicopters, things like this. So typically, if you want to fly your drone into that commercial airspace, that's where you actually have to have what they call a commercial drone pilot license. It's like $15. You pay for it, and you've got your license. And of course, when you go on to the FFA website, as far as the drones, UAVs, what they call them, it tells you, typically, if we go back into when Trump was president, there was one rule that's different than it is today. But during that time, you had to file a flight plan. If you're going above 500 feet, you have to file a flight plan with the FFA. And for the reasons is because if I'm going to fly in an airspace that might be, say, 5 miles from an airport, okay, I don't want my drone to crash into, a commercial jetliner and cause the death of like 200 people, So they had very stringent rules. But when Biden took office, one of the first things they did was they got rid of that rule. So they said it's recommended that you have to reach out to anybody that's going to be flying an airplane in that area where you're going to be flying. You got to figure out who the pilots are going to be. If you're 5 miles from the airport, then you're going to go to the airport, give them my flight plan, and then the airport will give you the phone number of the pilots, and you got to coordinate with the pilots on what days he's going to be flying through there. So they want you to do all this. It's not required though, but it's suggested. And I think that's where they kind of opened up that Pandora's box, basically, to allow anybody with a drone to fly these drones, without actually having to report anything.
without a
Hello?
record. So what happens if somebody decides to go out there and use it for sabotage? Because I
Mhm.
did see a plane that got hit recently. It was hit. They're not claiming on what hit it, but the minute that I saw that, I was like, huh, it looks like it got nicked by a drone.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, you know, I know a lot of times, it's the probability of bird strikes that happens. But, if you think about it, if a drone hits that jet engine, it can do just as much damage as a bird strike can, right? Um, but I think the fact that they don't have that rule to begin with, that poses a safety risk for everybody. And, but I also think this kind of opens that door for potential terrorists to take
Mhm.
advantage of the situation. Um, Now, as far as the rules go and like where you can fly your drones, that's pretty much set standard. Like, your nuclear power plants, your government buildings, military base installations. Usually those are what they call no-fly zones. You can't, there's, they'll tell you or show you on an FFA map a certain that area. Like I think it's like 2 miles, so you can't be within 2 miles of those places. And the reason being is because those are the most vulnerable, critical part of our infrastructure. But those also are what we call known targets for nuclear weapons that are being flown into, say from Russia or something. They compiled back in the 50s, they compiled a report to find out uh, where we're most vulnerable. And they determined nuclear power plants, um, military bases, government buildings, government installations as well. So those three, as that's why they have no fly zones in those areas, especially like the White House, for example, or the Capitol. They don't allow, even if I have a really small drone, I want to fly it. I'm not allowed to fly a drone in that area at all. But now, if I want to, I have to go get permission. I have to go to the FFA, put in a request. That has to go to the White House, and then the people at the White House have to run their background checks on me, and they're going to come to me. Probably send an FBI agent to my house and say, "Hey, we understand you want to fly a drone in this area. We just need to know why, what kind of drones you have. Show us." I mean, they're going to go through everything. So it's not like they take it very lightly. But this mystery of us not knowing anything for 4 or 5 days, and then finally they come out and said, "Oh, these people are approved to fly these drones in no-fly zones to begin with." So that tells me that only one of the three type of category of organizations or groups or individuals that can fly in there. They're either military contractors who are contracted to sniff for NBCs, or they're U.S. military, or their local law enforcement or FBI. Um, to They're looking for something. Okay, and we know that the Global Hawk is outfitted specifically designed for NBCs. That's their main primary function, is to look for nuclear, biological, or chemical weapons. So
This is just so interesting. I could just sit and listen to you talk for hours on this, because the kind of information that you bring forward isn't what you would normally see or have access to. So I really appreciate that. Do you want to, let's look at this guy again a minute. And I think that this is very interesting. Are there any other drones on here that you want to talk about?
sure. So what we see here, the Reaper MQ-9. This is the drone that everybody knows that was flown in Afghanistan. It's flown in like a lot of the classified military um, operations they've done in Afghanistan and Iraq. Okay. We've seen, and of course, when Trump came into office, started declassifying a lot of these videos, a lot of this information. So basically, this particular drone is, it's got little warheads, or I wouldn't say warhead, missiles on them. They're really small missiles, but they do a lot of damage. And they can, I think the payload is like up to 10, I believe, 10 missiles for it. They also have one of the best IR surveillance cameras in the world that's actually equipped with these things. Now, this one here, it says the operation flight is 14 hours. What's cool about this is that there's a nearby U.S. air base. The pilot, the drone operator that's actually flying this, is back somewhere like, say, Colorado, Utah, or say Montana. And they're linked by satellite. So they're looking, basically, it's, you've got some 18-year-old glorified video gamer kid sitting behind a screen with the remote control, and he's basically piloting this particular aircraft. And you got the folks, say, in Qatar, they coordinate it. So what they do is they put them out and they load all the armaments on it, and then they radio back, letting them know, okay, it's ready to go. And that person just sits there and taxis out that little drone and just takes off and starts flying it. They're looking at a big TV screen. Sometimes they have multiple screens on there. And they usually have somebody that's a higher rank than them that tells them, okay, this is where we're going. This is what we're looking for, or this is what we're doing. Sometimes they carry out, your like military assassinations on maybe like an Al-Qaeda member, or some type of terrorist cell that they need to take out. They'll fly those in there. Sometimes that's usually accompanied by undercover operators who will go into that area, and they'll use those Black Hornets, for example. They'll fly the Black Hornets kind of in through the building, maybe look through the windows, and they're looking for what you see at the bottom of the screen here. It's really small. It's about, maybe half the size of my palm with my hand. So they're really, really small. They're super quiet. They give off the sound maybe of a buzzing bee at most, but you can fly them into a building and take them up into the ceiling. You can kind of spy down. They see weapons cached there. They see maybe 12 heads of the Taliban having a meeting, then that operator will then radio in to the pilot of that drone and say, okay, and he uploads those images to them. And so whoever is at the point of high rank will decide, okay, we need to take out this building, but they have set rules that they have to go by. And so one of the rules is to minimize collateral damage, right? Or zero collateral damage. And so if they see an opening, then that pilot will then target that specific building with, let's say 12 heads of Al-Qaeda, and send a rocket into it and blow it up. Usually the implosion is not as big as your traditional missiles, but it does enough damage to kind of wipe out, say those 12 men and whatever weapons cache that they have. And so we've been using these drones as a new state of warfare. This is like the fifth generation of warfare fighting. And that's why we're kind of in a drone war right now. The NGOs are profiting off of this, making millions of dollars, not just from us, but from a lot of other countries as well. They don't care about, as far as national security goes, kind of more to the point is that they're the source of a lot of the problems that's going on in the world today, but they also present themselves as the only option, the only solution to these problems. When in fact we got people in Congress that are compromised to begin with. They're not going to take any actions against these organizations, these NGOs that are creating these war machinery. And that's pretty concerning, especially now that we know that there's radiation leaks all across this country. I'm going to be doing some more investigation as I go along to discover, see there's more, where these leaks are specifically, and what the rad levels are, and I'm going to keep, reporting on this as I go along on X, just to let people know, if it's at beyond the safe levels, they need to be aware. At least, keep in mind that you need to get a bug out bag. You need to get that ready to go. You need to pick out your bug out locations that you're going to go to as far enough away from that area. Because of these, we do find these reports that there is extremely high levels of radiation. The government's not going to tell us. Trump, he's the incoming president. Yes, he does get classified information. Yes, there are certain things he can say and things he can't say. That's not. It's not because he doesn't want to. Sometimes he kind of words it. He said, "Hey, get out of Bedminster, New Jersey, or don't be in that area," right? That should be, on everybody's antenna. If you're in that area, it should be go, okay, why? What's going on with the drones, and
Right.
Start to do some digging yourself. And but that's kind of the reason why I'm here today, is to point people in the right direction. They can they can go to that website. They can pull up if they're in that city. They can pull up the reports. They can go back as far, I think, as 2 years, and all the way up to current. I think that's something that everybody should, definitely have saved on their computer, anyway, on their tab, so they can keep going back to it. But it's a really good resourceful tool that the government's not going to tell us, and they're not going to come out and say, "Hey, we got 60 missing nuclear warheads." And if that is the case, and it seems to be, all common sense and all checking off all the checklists as to why there's radiation in that area to begin with, and the other two are not feasible, that only leaves one thing left, which is missing nuclear warheads leaking. That should be a grave concern for everybody there, the mayors. There should be National Guard already on the ground, evacuating the area. Why this is not happening, I don't know. That's.
Let me ask you a question. Okay, this goes into a real dark place, but I got to ask it. Could the drones themselves be carrying the nuclear materials if a bad guy had them under control, rather than on the ground?
I'm sure there's a possibility, but again, the nuclear warheads themselves, the shielding on them are pretty heavy.
How heavy are they? And if you were to guess the size of most of them, like a physical dimension, what do you know? When you know what size or what the potential for leaking really would be with these warheads, or are they kind of?
Honestly, I don't know, but that's something we can Google up. We can, get an idea of that information. But I do know that a lot of the shielding is extremely heavy, and the reason being is because a lot of that shielding is lead. So oftentimes they would encase that in lead. Number one is to prevent the leakage, right? To make sure that it's pretty buttoned up tight. But for number two, that's pretty much one of the only few things that doesn't react with the fission core. So the lead itself is pretty heavy. So I would say, I don't, we can, a typical warhead, I want to say on average is about 800 kilotons. So let's look this up here real quick.
Denise came on and said they're probably dropping these missing nukes in key areas. Unbelievable that Netflix is rerunning the Leave the World Behind movie by Obama, the Kenyan. Can't stand that guy.
Yeah. I think what they were doing is putting out these feature films, because they were trying to desensitize people. So if something does
programming.
Yeah, exactly. And so people say, "Oh no, that was just a movie. This is different. This is just a movie." They don't want to see the correlation. They don't want to see. Okay, you've got Hollywood, who has been known to work with the CIA, and this has been for decades. Okay, now understand the CIA used to be what they called OSS during World War II. After the war was over, it was supposed to dissolve. The OSS was supposed to dissolve, and it didn't. Instead, it converted itself over. That was done by the NGOs. Okay, that were primarily responsible for converting OSS into what becoming known as CIA today. And we know that the CIA has been controlled by the NGOs ever since then. There's a lot of rich history behind the NGOs and how the Banana Republic plays there's a company, the banana company, that, when you go to the store and you buy the bananas, you see that little lady with the little fruit hat on.
Pita or Dole or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That company is primarily directly responsible for taking the OSS and converting it into a CIA. And they were the ones that put out the first marching orders for the Central Intelligence Agency. So
that's pretty crazy. So is it because they get so much funding through the NGOs? So they can be tracked? Is that like the dark money or the dark ops type projects and such?
Yeah. So what we do know is a lot of the dark money that CIA gets has been through the NGOs, and the NGOs would help them set up, like the gun running, the drug running, the prostitution, the trafficking, the human trafficking, and they have made all this money. And what they do is they take that money and they use them for certain operations they want to do off the books, because if they have to take accountability for every single taxpayer dollar that they use. And generally they use a lot of that to pay for the salaries, the expenses here and there. But for so large, the operational cost, the major bulk of it is coming from the NGOs and their relationship with the NGOs.
Well, it's really interesting because yesterday on the broadcast, we were showing the fact that I've got this nice little report right here, plus others, but that Dana Nessel and her wife, our Attorney General, paid the fraudulent signature gatherers, which rigged the election in 2022 to kick 5 of us off the ballot, paid them an NGO that she, and then subsequently after her wife, was running over $1 million to the fraudulent signature gatherers. That should be really concerning, because when you look at that and all the other nonsense that happened with stashing ballots and such in these NGOs, I think we really need to go down that area and seriously research what the intention or the involvement of NGOs has been in the United States over the last, I don't know how many decades, to money launder for all of the criminal activity that's gone on, and how that's really affected or torn down the United States. This is the first I've heard that they're really the ones running the CIA, and it makes sense because that's where the global players would be, like Soros's open secrets or open societies, and all the other stuff that these globalists are involved in. Of course, they're going to come out and do it through citizen activation entity.
Yeah, and I mean this goes pretty far back. The NGOs, they started making their way into our government around 1883. but it really wasn't noticeable until about 1913. That's when Woodrow Wilson decided to allow the NGOs to come in and establish the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve, they have prominent Congress people on the board, but they make no decisions at all. Now they do get a salary, but they don't have to show up to those meetings.
I don't think half Congress does either. What is it? I've heard the amount of time actually people have butt in the seats time for any of the legislators, whether it be state or Congress, that they just don't show up.
Mm-mm. And according to the Constitution, the Federal Reserve, which is, by the way, is not owned or nor controlled by the U.S. government. It is by all purposes an attempt to subvert the government, to take over the government. And so, according to the Constitution, it's illegal, number one, and number two, it should be registered as a foreign entity, and which is not. So we know that the Bank of England, we also know that the Vatican, they've also had a big hand in a lot of the creation of the Federal Reserve, as well as the Rothschild family, who owns the biggest banking empire for the last 200-300 years, well, since the French Revolution anyway. So the issue, that a lot of people don't understand is that a lot of the education, they controlled a lot of the education. Rockefellers were a big part of this secret society of the NGOs. They're one of the original figureheads of the NGO. But once the Federal Reserve was established, that's when they started creating all of these other departments. We see the FBI, CIA, the ATF, NSTB, the Food and Drug Administration, the CDC, NIH, all these agencies. They slowly started bringing them in. It was all for the purpose of control and taxation. So a lot of it is taxation without representation. So they tell us, Congress does as well. Like recently, that was big omnibus bill, which is like 1,500 pages.
Isn't that a bunch of crap?
Yeah, they wanted to ram it through the last second, before the winter break, and hopefully the Republicans would vote for it and then find out what's in it later. But we see there was a lot of shady stuff in there. Like, for example, like they didn't want to be investigated for the J6 Select Committee, didn't want to be investigated down the road for their actions on J6. There was the pay increase, the $63,000 increase for every congressperson. There's also goes into pumping and dumping millions of dollars into the Patriot Act, which allows the government to not only spy on American citizens, it actually legitimately gives them the right to actually censor us at every level. And with that, it allows them to be able to punish us the same fashion as what's going on in Canada, China, the UK. And they weren't expecting anybody to read it. And unfortunately, Elon took the time, sat down, and went through it all.
So did Vivek.
Huh?
Vivek did too.
Vivek too, yeah.
Yeah.
So they were putting all this stuff out, saying, hey, this is what's in the bill. Call your congressman, tell them no. And of course, we all know X is the new news source. So where you're going to find it.
They're still censoring, though.
Yeah, somewhat.
I just had a friend that sent me something that he was actually taken out for 12 days for something that he wrote. So, and I've had several posts that never made it through, and I couldn't get it to post for some reason. So X is still censoring.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think we need to look at every single thing out there with a bit of suspicion, but because nothing is in its purest form here. And I've really been pondering that lately, because I know a lot of people that are really angry around me, a lot, very angry. They're not coping. So they go into anger very, very quickly. My thoughts on this is that, hey, this is, at this point in time, there's so much evil here. This is where we get to practice love and grace as well as justice, and figure out how to discern things better, because we're in a non-ideal situation. And if you can stand under non-ideal circumstances and still come up on top, don't expect anybody to fix things at all. What we need to do is get in there and try to do something ourselves on an individual effort. We can all do that every single day. There's always something that we can do to make the world a better place, even if it was one or two people. Jesus could have come here and saved the entire planet, but he went to people, as it evidenced in Philip and such, one at a time. One at a time. And during his life, his walk. And I think we can learn from that, is no matter how bad it is out there, it's still our responsibility to not join in, to stand and practice all of those invisible things that continue on into the next life. Because we're only here on a work visa anyhow, so let's make it worthwhile,
Well, and that's the thing is, I've never been one to join any kind of mob mentality. Even growing up as a kid, I was always like, I'd be that one kid that's got kind of off in the corner, exploring things. And then when I got older, then I kind of got pushed into sports. And even when I was on sports teams, I was always kind of like that one kid that was just annoying as hell, trying to push everybody to work harder, and then, of course, later on in life, I didn't realize that, I learned that was a kind of a bit of a leadership quality. But I was also kind of a person that's just, would spend more time listening.
Yeah, kind of sick of the crap kind of thing.
Yeah.
I was the same way. I was bored with the kids playing. I don't play well. I didn't when I was a kid, and I still don't. And so I would find somebody that was older and just sit and talk with them. The older the person was, the more interesting I found them to be. So I think that's something that we can learn. And also something, as people get older, the fragmenting that's happened with our younger people, where they can only hang out together because that's how the schools are structured. They only hang out with people their own age and basically their own socioeconomic background. It's a farce when they say that they're actually, exposing people to differences. They're not at all. They're from a same basic area, same basic background, and same basic problems and such. It's not really exposing them to a damn thing. And so it starts there. And then you watch the phones, and they only talk to people that they're texting and such, which is great, because if somebody makes you mad, you can just walk away. You don't have to stay with you. You don't have to practice grace. You can just diss them and then go out there and absolutely destroy them on social media because they got their feelings hurt in a non-adult activity. Oh, boo-hoo, somebody hurt my feelings. And then they go in for the complete destruction shot. It is on. And then what are you going to do when you have to face these people later, since you can't talk to human beings like human beings? But it's been a slow burn on society, in people having that long suffering with each other, not being offended, going ahead and practicing grace and such. It's all been a horrible takedown, and it's gone on for many, many decades, unfortunately. But I think we have a wonderful opportunity to practice those characteristics, because it is so non-ideal. You're gonna have, if you're gonna win in any of these areas, that's a character building quality. You got to be in it for the right reason and to win. And what I mean to win is to never fail, unwaver, serve God with an unwavering heart, and do whatever He asks you to do here without getting tugged into that emotional sabotage, which, to my observation is the core to all of this. The emotional instability of human beings is shocking.
Yeah. And then that's all done. That's all done on purpose. This is all geoengineered trying to bring about the collapse of the American dynasty. You know, this
Human
is
beings.
this is a Clive Plowing strategy. To break us in every aspect. Something like I always told my kids when they were growing up was, in life, you got two choices, and you need to understand you have zero control of everything around you, but you do have the power of influence, and you can use that power of influence for good, to help others, or to make life better for everyone else, or you can use it for selfish destructive reasons. Which I kind of see a lot of that in my field of work and security and policing. So how you use it, that's up to you. But you have two choices in life, and you can do those things. But understand, the only power that you really have is your choices, no matter how small or how great. And to understand that you're always going to have consequences. Now, a lot of people think when they hear the word consequences, they think of like, like you're getting spanked with the belt or you're going to jail or whatever. No, consequences means from a scientific term, is every action has an opposite and equal reaction. So if you bless somebody, you're saying words of blessing out of your mouth, or whether you're using your thumbs to bless somebody. And God's natural law is whatever you put out is what you will receive. So if you're putting out blessings, you're going to end up receiving blessings. If you're putting out curses on people, for example, like just reacting to everything that you see that offends you, then expect the same in return, right? And this is just a perpetuates the cycle. So you can break that cycle by just changing one thing, and that is bless somebody today.
And refuse to be offended. Because
exactly.
Here's another thing. When somebody does something which is offensive to you or bad behavior on their part, I had a couple of situations this week of betrayal. And I don't take it personally. I just sit back and say, well, you people are really stupid. Because it really was on them, and it showed their character. It had nothing to do with me. It was a very poor choice or poor choices that were made by the people that were involved. But there's no way I'm going to get offended or upset or angry or go into meltdown because somebody else was stupid. And I think that that's the choices that we make, is that you're either here to be the calm in the storm, because the storm's here, and it's not going away until Jesus puts his foot back on this planet and it's everybody out of the pool. Until that time, we got what we got, and he's allowing this. So there's a reason for it. So what evil or Satan means for bad or for our destruction, God uses that for growth and for good. So like it's knocking the rough off the diamonds. He knows he's got diamonds here. But when we go through bad situations, it tests us. And what I mean by that is that it changes us. And you can either decide to be a victim, which now you've just decided to be part of the problem, or maybe you are the problem, or you decide that, you know what, I'm me, I know what I'm about, and I'm not going to bend a knee to any of this nonsense to participate, even to participate in those things that are evil. And I'm going to tell you, the gossip is evil in a very base level. If you think something before you've done it, you're already entertaining evil in your spirit. You have to close the door on it in your own heart. And then if you do have to face something bad, it's on the outside rather than on the inside of influence. If it can take you captive emotionally, it's already got one foot in the door somewhere, and you probably should go through your life or what the things you're doing and absolutely abolish it, abandon it, and kick it out without any apology for it. And that doesn't mean you're kicking the people out, because people around you are going to fail.
Right.
People fail, and they fail a lot. But you don't have to participate in that.
Yeah, and this is where our society, for decades and decades, this has been a part of the NGO strategy. So let's make people as sick as possible as can, with as much chemical as possible as can. Let's start filtering down the education system. Let's start creating the most dumbest emotional-based creatures as possible, where critical thinking is out the window, and so they just react to everything to become explosive, right?
That's it. Mm-hmm.
And my wife and I were very, very quiet people. We don't really usually get involved with drama. A lot of it is because it's like the seasons, they change so damn fast,
Mm-hmm.
But what doesn't change is people's perception of you. When how like I always tell my kids, you have a choice. You can either react or you can respond. A response is where you take a step back, you make an intelligent decision, and say, well, is this really my problem? No. I'm not going to get involved. Is it really, is this something that if a person says something to me, or whether they say it behind my back to my face, saying something about something or whatever, or maybe I did something or whatever, if I know it's not true, then I'm not going to respond to it. If it is true, parts of it might be true. I might, come out and say, hey, well, you're right about this, but you're wrong about this. But a lot of times I would rather just, take that person. I would just call them up directly, or I would go and, meet with them face to face, in private, and say, hey, you got a problem with me. I just need to know why. Is this something I did wrong? Or is your perception of me is, I need to know what it is. And just kind of work through it. That's like responsible adults do, to talk through these problems together. And sometimes it could be just, it might be extenuating circumstances, might be outlying circumstances. And all of a sudden it just came to a head, and something just kind of set it off. And the responses or the reaction to whatever, wasn't appropriate. But I'll still, like I always tell my kids, I love you, and I forgive you. Not because I have to, it's because I have a choice today, and I want to bless people. Regardless of what your response is or what your reaction is, I'm going to still bless you. Because in the end, what matters is the fact that it's my conduct. I'm responsible for my own conduct. If I'm blessing people, praying for people, even if they persecute me, like Jesus says, in the end, the result is going to be is this. I'm going to get that blessing is going to come back tenfold, and I certainly want to see resolution, rather than continuing conflicts. And it's sometimes it's hard to navigate. Sometimes I've had time or folks that I've just walked away completely. I won't say anything. I just walk away. I just sometimes I just don't care. Other times I do care enough to actually just walk away. Let people be by themselves. Let them their own works get them into trouble. Because like my dad always told me, he said, "There's always somebody bigger than you out there." I kind of know what he meant too. And socially, somebody, I spend more time trying to hold myself accountable. I really don't have time to hold other people accountable. But what I do is always going to be the politicians, because everybody knows that They're just as bad as the hookers anyway.
You kind of got that right. That's a good analogy. But yeah, I feel the same way. A lot of times, I'll watch people and they'll try to get me emotionally tied into things and compromised. And I just sit there and go, we'll see what is their purpose for getting me tied into these issues. Because there's no way to know if they're telling the truth. And a lot of times, just because somebody makes an allegation doesn't mean there's any truth in it. Or what are they trying to do? What is their objective in moving you into an emotional response? There's always a reason there. So a lot of times I just sit back and I go, well, now don't we have an issue here? We don't have just one issue. We have at least 2 or 3 of them. And it's likely that none of them are telling the truth. So it's not the person that's giving you the story that you want to hear or that resonates because you have experiences in your background or any of that. It's the fact that every single one of them is probably doing the wrong thing. There's very few people that will do the right thing at any given time because human beings generally have an agenda. They're always making trades. You see very few people that have true intention of just wanting the world to be a right place. Most of them, it's the only thing that they're doing is they're trying to scratch to the top of the orphan pile of humanity. There's actually, so I adopted a little girl years ago, and her mom died at her side in a train accident. She's very, very disabled. She has, she's missing half of her brain, and she's really got some serious problems. There's no two ways about it. She can't be alone for 5 minutes. Okay. And what you see when you go through that is it's all these difficult things. So it was very, very difficult. I was not prepared for this, and they lied about her. Everybody in the situation lied. And here I've got this very, very disabled child that we weren't expecting because they lied. And first time I went to the doctor's office, he was pretty abysmally, his diagnosis was abysmal. He's like, I think you should probably just go call somebody and have her put in an institution somewhere. Well, of course I couldn't accept that. I wasn't going to accept that at all. So, it's like you take on the responsibility for another human being and you carry that weight for whatever reason. And I feel that way. Yeah. So, but one thing, there's things that you learn going through very, very difficult situations. And I mean, she can be real hostile if she's not medicated. You'll sit there and listen to her go, chant that somebody must be unalived and that sort of thing. And she can be pretty violent. She's attacked me a few times, and I didn't really even know how good my little black belt ninja skills were. And not a black belt, but to disable her from doing bodily harm. It was just disabling her. Yeah. And that's just the reality of the world. But what you find out when you adopt a child from an orphanage who was in there for a long time, they said she was 3. She was actually probably closer to 5 or 6. She was the size of a 2-year-old. She still had that newborn a wah cry because that's the way she would get attention, being brain damaged with half of her brain in an orphanage. There was a lot of complications there. But a person who it's called an orphanage mentality. And that's what I see the entire world basically, because they've walked away from God, their father, who is the only one that could parent you out of anything. They walked away from it and they put themselves into that orphanage mentality. Yep. Orphanage mentality is that they will crawl on the top of the heap and push everybody down to try to gain position or the attention of somebody that can help meet their needs. Not only that, but when you do adopt a child, even if it's in a better situation, they're always going to grieve what they left because it was familiar. That was the problem with Lot and Sarah in the Bible. Sarah kept looking back. She was looking back to what happened in Sodom and Gomorrah, and she couldn't leave what she was familiar with and move on to something better because all she saw was the loss. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But that's a human characteristic of not being able to move on. And it's an orphan characteristic. And if somebody has that, you can guarantee by looking at them that they've walked away from a relationship with God Almighty. And it's indicative, it's consistent. and it's a very hard thing to walk people past. But if you do, you're going to have to be real tough, and I mean, you're going to have to be real damn tough to stick with it because of the amount of damage that people are willing to do. But that's what we have right now.
I know. I've heard many people say that they blame the internet, or they blame their parents. Like they will say, "Oh, the X generations, they weren't tough like their parents were." I always say, it comes down to those. Once you turn 18, you're responsible for every decision you ever make in life.
That's right.
And you should really know really quick what God's natural law is like. What are the do's and don'ts? If you want to know what the do's and don'ts are, go read the book of Proverbs. If you want to find comfort in God's bosom, go read the book of Psalms. And my wife and I, we had this discussion one night about how society is today. And she says, it's kind of like having a couple of kids. She says they're always constantly fighting. They're always constantly trying to get your attention. And the reason is because they never learn how to self-soothe themselves. How they, like with our kids, I always had this kind of a requirement. By the time they're 6 months old, they're sleeping in the cribs by themselves. I'm not going to answer their cries until tomorrow morning. They have to learn how to self-soothe themselves. I know some people say that's kind of cruel. Even to this day, my kids, you ask my kids, who's the good guy? Who's the bad guy? Which of your parents is the good guy? And they always say my wife, because she has the nursing qualities and, tender and loving and forgiving. And I'm the drill sergeant, I would always get after my kids. But my big thing is, every time they mess up, I would say, what you learn?
How's that working for you? That's what I did to my kids. How's that working for you? I was the tough parent. I was the one that they were waiting for dad to get home to get away from the ass chewing from mom, because it probably is still going on. It's like until I saw better behavior, I wouldn't take the pressure off of them. So.
Yeah, but I wanted to add one thing too about this investigation that we've been talking about today, is just kind of drive this point home. But so back on September 6th of 2022, The Hill had just put out an article. It says that the Department of Human Health Services bought $290 million worth of, it's called N-plate. And what it is it's the same thing as potassium iodine. In an event to treat radiation sickness in an event of a nuclear emergency. They knew ahead of time this was coming. They were preparing for this. And I've seen, and even then, because I work in the field of security sector as a consultant, I kind of hone in and I focus very, very consistently with whatever Homeland puts out. So I look at the Homeland Security website. I go through all of their newsletters. I read everything that they put out. I read everything the FBI puts out. I see consistency and pattern. Nothing is like the best way to put it. Nothing happens by accident, right?
No coincidences.
Coincidence. I believe there's a pattern to everything. And back in 2019, I was ringing the bell, so to speak, doing the Paul Revere thing, letting people know that you should be focused on your home security. You should be beefing that up. Number two, you should be focused on learning how to survive in any kind of disaster scenario. And I've gone to the point of instead of constantly repeating myself on social media, I wrote 2 books. I published 2 books. I've actually gotten quite a few awards for them. But the first one is called The Ultimate Home Security Book. It's been praised as the best home security book that's ever been written.
Is it on Amazon?
Yeah, that's on Amazon.
Oh, we know where Donna's going to be going right now. I you know what? I almost always buy books that people that are on the show will talk about. Okay, so the ultimate
Home Security, and that book is what it does is think of it like in the context. You're taking, say 2 years of law enforcement and 10 years of security enforcement information.
Oh, there it is.
And you apply that to your building, to your house, to your, your business or whatever. It's going to teach you the basic fundamentals, which is prevention, deterring, and defense. Right? So it's wrapped around those three key points. The goal is to prevent a burglary and to prevent a home invasion. Right?
Okay, I gotta see if I can pull it up here. I'll show it to you. Is it this guy right there?
Yes.
That's it? Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, guess what? That little beauty is going to be mine right now. And I want you to sign this for me someday.
Sounds good. And then
I get a signed copy. I've got Chadwick Moore was on yesterday. He was a biographer for Tucker Carlson. Ding, 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 ding. And I've got a signed copy of his book also.
The second book that I have out there, it actually teaches people how to survive any kind of situation. So,
okay, and what's that one called?
That one's called The Survivor's Bible. That is a military survival manual that's designed for civilians that will help you make really good decisions in bad times. You will know when it's time to bug in and when it's time to bug out. But more importantly, having a plan in place, just like you do when, you have fire. Well, it used to be that people had fire drills in their home, right? Mom and dad would set up some kind of a fire drill, and they would educate the kids what to do in case of a fire. And you got to leave the house. You go out across the street. You call 911 and let the dispatcher know your house is on fire, the address, and all that stuff, right? Same thing when we were kids. We used to have bomb drills in schools. We had to crawl up underneath our desk, independent, of a nuclear bomb, right? Which is kind of funny because I don't think crawling underneath the desk is going to save you. But
well, I remember that being in school, having to go under the desk, and we had nuclear drills when I was in school. So I'm 61 this year, so I absolutely remember that. So I'm looking for it, but I'm not finding it on Amazon.
That book has been kind of shadow banned by Amazon because it does so well.
Well, how do I find it?
Okay.
I tell you what, we'll talk when we get offline, and maybe you can send me a copy, and I can do it that way.
Yeah, we can do that too.
Yeah, I'll just buy it directly from you. That's okay. We can do that too.
All right, sounds good.
Screw you, Amazon, and your shadow banning. We find ways around it.
I've had a lot of success with those two books, but the point is that I wrote these two books to educate people, and it's always better to have something in your hand, because you can stick them in your bug out bags or whatever, and you have them on hand. So if you find yourself in a situation, you're trying to figure out what's the best course of action, you can take this with you. Yeah.
This one's a really good one, and I've got quite a collection of books also.
Okay.
And I that's not just the only one. I've got if you saw my library of books, you'd be like, holy Moses, Donna, you got a problem.
There is one other book I do recommend to people. It's not something that I wrote, but it's called The Ultimate Survival Medicine Guide. And this is actually written by a practicing doctor and his wife, who is an LPN.
The Ultimate Survival Medicine Guide.
Yeah, The Ultimate Survival Medicine Guide by Joseph Alton, MD, and Amy Alton, ARNP. And this is really this is probably one of the best medical books that was put together.
This guy right there, right?
Yes.
Okay.
I used to be a paramedic at one time. And, I buy books like this. I kind of go through them with great detail. And I've got, like 30 different bug out books. And I've gone through them all. And I tore them. I literally take those books apart. And I always, write in there, this is wrong. This is dangerous. This is not correct. And what I've learned is that you get a lot of folks that write these books. They have never been in these type of, situations, or they don't have that experience, or they don't really have the proper training for that kind of stuff. And so I, for all intents and purposes, I'm a huge critic when it comes to any type of survival books that are out there. And I scour through them, read them, and then I kind of pick them apart because I know what works and what doesn't work based on my experience. And,
I feel the same with gardening and farming and animals. The typical thing with people that want to be around our horses is, oh yeah, I know about horses. Well, they've probably been to a riding stable where they went out on a trail ride with a horse that's out there 3-4 times a day in the same conditions, and they have somebody else saddle the horse, and they have no idea how you really handle a horse that's basically not just beaten down and used to doing like a pack animal situation every day. The ones that are in the people that go to the show circuits too, they're not your best riders. They ride in a circle, very controlled environment, and they do it for the ribbons. The ones that really take the cake are the ones who can take a horse out and on the trail under any condition and adapt to it, have a good enough seat to stay on the horse, but they can adapt to an uncontrollable situation on an uncontrollable animal. Because when you get out there out really outside in the outside, you have all sorts of things that pop up or that test the adaptability of both yourself as well as the animal.
Right. When I was down in Texas, I met a lot of ranchers who, do ride horses every day. They take their horses out. They're out looking for their cows. They're trying to round up their, cows and bring them back or whatever. And that terrain in the Panhandle, it is brutal in every aspect. The conditions out there during the summer, you're talking, 100-degree plus. As far as water goes, there's not a lot of water to be found in those areas unless you go down into the ravines. But there's a lot of different factors that come into play, and these people are very well trained. They know how to ride it, but a lot of things too that people don't understand is, when it comes to survival. This is something my family and I have done many countless times. When we go camping, we don't just go camping. We go out camping and we put our survival skills to the test. We don't spend $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 on buying all this equipment. The idea is that you approach it as a minimalist, and you want to cover, all conditions, whether it's in the snow, whether it's in the hottest heat, during rain, during normal, just, your nice conditions, say in May. So you want to cover all 4 seasons. And the whole intents and purposes go out there. You're learning how to start a fire. You're learning how to build shelter out of the resources around you. You're learning how to forage for food, right? Mm-hmm. And understanding, what foods will sustain you, what foods won't sustain you, what foods that you can find that you can use for medicine, how to make your own medicine. We're going hiking. We're going in places that a lot of people normally don't go hiking. And, sometimes along the way we might meet some people, and we're trying to teach our kids about sociable skills too. But there's like a lot of do's and don'ts when you're out there doing these different things. And it's not just in the woods, but we're trying to cover all types of terrains, whether it's in the city, whether it's in, out in the woods, or whether it's in the, more drier conditions, um, how to source and find water, you know. And the interesting thing about all of it is that my wife and I were extremely active with our kids. We were teaching them the basic primal skills, but at the same time, we were teaching them about self-defense skills, hand-to-hand combat, how to use guns properly. Gun safety was always a big thing in our house. When I worked as an armed security officer, I was a supervisor. I had guys under me. I would take them out, and we would go to these training centers, and we would learn how to do specifically design training, which is like what they call TAC 1 training, because this is where we get into, if you're working at a bank or something, and you got somebody trying to rob the bank, it might be more than one person. So we're learning about making the good decisions that's going to save lives, And what I did was I took a lot of education and I started teaching my kids the same thing. So when it comes to survival training, it's not just, one thing. It's literally like multi-layers of different things. But like one of the things I do anyway, for preparation is people have got kind of stuck in this mentality. It's either bugging in or bugging out, one or the other, and that's it. And I was telling them, I said, no, it's both things. So when you're going to bug out, do you have a location in mind? Have you been there? Do you know the different alternate routes to get there? Consider all the conditions. So whether it could be in the middle of a blizzard, it could be in a rainstorm, you could have, 4 million people trying to get out of the city. That the major highways are going to be jammed up. Chances are somebody's going to panic, cause a crash, jam up the rest of the people.
And then you're really stuck.
Right?
With a whole bunch of other people who are also panicking. And that's the problem. That's another part of this. To your point here is that when you're a rider, a horse rider in the field, you're out in the boonies here, and you're riding with all sorts of things that can happen.
Yeah.
The biggest thing that you can do is know how to keep an irrational being from going into crazy land. You have to have the confidence as a leader. They have to trust you that you are going to do the right thing every time. And you have to be able to get in front of the threat so that whatever is the threat, it becomes a non-threat. You have to show them that there's no threat there.
Yeah.
And that's another whole skill. Another thing is that if you think about it, if you keep things on you that like I can go for 3 days without eating, no problem. I've trained myself to do all sorts of things that most people probably would have a difficult time with. But if you have something that gets past that brain reaction, you can override the brain's reaction if you do several things. So pull a sugar cube out of your pocket, have a mint or something, make it normal. It's a distraction thing for them so that, oh yeah, okay, now there's a pleasant thing here, and it can decelerate things just enough to get past the crazy reaction of an animal. And we act the same way that animals do. And that's just the way it is. We have a survival sense for our bodies, though we're spirits in a meat suit. We're still having to deal with some of that stuff. But to think it through in a situation like that, how do you overcome a natural reaction of an irrational, frightened creature?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. One of the things that we did was, when I was thinking of bug out locations was that you could go out there, you can buy all the books you want, but this is one thing they won't tell you is that you need to consider bug out locations in 8 different directions. So when you look at a compass, you see the 4 main directions, right? North, south, and east and west. then you need to consider like, northwest, northeast, southeast, southwest, right? So we have 8 locations that we either own or we have friends or family that live in those within a 1 day's drive. So all these locations, we have a cache of a 50-gallon drum, a couple of 50-gallon drums. We have one with all the food and the rations and the medicine and all that stuff, and the other one we got like like our extra ammo. We have an extra rifle or a gun in there. We've got an extra can of gasoline. So we have all of those things there. So when we need to be able to kind of we get to that point that we're going to be there. When we leave our house, we're leaving our home, our primary residence, with the intent we're never going to come back. Okay? We're never going to come back. We're going to go to this other location. But all I usually do is try to gather very quick intel where the threat's coming from, so I can move in the opposite direction. I go to that location, and we set up whatever we need to set up, for housing. We've got food there. We can start cooking. We can start, doing the things that we need to do in order to survive. And then we can go from there, and we can move on to our other bug out locations if we need to. But we have options, so we give ourselves options. Then this is what's kind of interesting is I would take my family, and we would do bug out drills. I would say, okay, we need to bug out. We need to go now. And the whole purpose of it is to time ourselves. How long does it take for us to go from where we are in the house into the car and get outside of the city, say 2 miles, and we would time ourselves, right? So our response time should get better and better each time. So we should get it down to an art, a science, so that when we get to that point, let's say we can get 2 miles outside the city within, say, 5 minutes. Okay, that's really good time. If I'm spending more of my time trying to grab everything, right? Because oftentimes people get scared, they become very fearful, and they're not in control of their emotions. They start grabbing for anything and everything they can, run it out to the car, throw all that stuff back there, and then get in the car and leave. Well, they've already wasted 10 minutes of their time. And by the time they get on the road, well, everybody else has the same idea. So you're not actually ahead of the pack. You're pretty much in the middle of the end of the pack. That's not where you want to be. You want to be at the head of the pack. So you should have, everything already at your bug out locations. So the only thing that you should have to take with you is just a simple bug out bag, which is something I have here in my office with me. But I have a simple bug out bag. It's got all the basic essentials in it. I got this from BSO Survival Gear, but I've added a few other things to it, And if I need to go, I just grab it. We're out the door. I've got the keys in my hands. We're going to our this location where we're going to. But at the same time, we also have our ham radio with us. Mm-hmm. So while I'm driving, my wife is doing the communication. So she's scanning for all of the, the bands, like the National Guard band, the local police band, all that stuff. And she's trying to gather information. She's also my navigator. I do the driving, and then we get to where we need to go. Any possible threats ahead of us, that she navigates us into an alternate road that we can turn off onto. So you
probably have a gazetteer and a map, because you never know if GPS is you're gonna have GPS if right. That goes down too. I think that's a very, very important. Let's see. Denise said we gather treasonous traitors in every state and have a swinging party, channel our founding fathers. I think so too. I mean, I really do think that we've got a lot of these people that are sitting in the seats, from the NGOs to the politicians. They're evil people, and they're compromised. anyone who's compromised is going to have to go in some form or another.
And we know that last year, was it this year or last year, there were 100 U.S. senators that they had given them satellite phones in event of emergency. Okay, why is it 100 U.S. senators are getting satellite phones, and why are they purchasing, $200 million worth of potassium iodine tablets, in case of a nuclear emergency? And why are they focused on a continuity of government, for Congress, not for the president, but for Congress, right? They're talking and doing all these things, and what I'm seeing is people are not paying attention to that. They're more kind of wrapped up into nonsensical drama issues.
Well, they've set themselves up as kings and queens and such, rather than public servants. They are not there to serve the people. They're there to have a structure to protect themselves, their interests, and their power. That's all I see going on.
Yeah, the Democrats came out not too long ago and said, knowing that Donald Trump has won the election shortly after he had won, they said, well, we're going to run a parallel government to Donald
I saw that.
Yeah. And they were naming off all the people that are going to be Secretary of State, Department of Human Health Services, Nuclear Regulatory Commission, like FBI, who's CIA. I mean, they literally came out and said, we are going to go into a civil war with the American people. We are going to set up our own government because we are not going to give a peaceful transfer of power to Donald Trump. And the fact that Trump came out and said, nah, you know what, for the transition, he said, no, we'll pay for it ourselves. We will pick who we want to pick. We do not need the Senate's approval on who we're going to pick. And this is something he learned, kind of the first time around, where the transition process said, well, we're going to pick these people, we'll put these people in, we'll help you with that process. And what happened was he ended up with a bunch of NGOs into these positions, and they were constantly working against him, trying to undermine everything that he was trying to accomplish the first time around. This time around, he knows exactly what he's doing. He's not taking any NGOs. The fact that he's also going to be creating a department to get rid of all these other departments. And this is the reason why the Democrats, the rhinos, they want to run a parallel government. That is a blatant violation of the Constitution, a blatant violation to their oath, which they should be removed immediately. But who's going to remove them? Well, everybody that has the ability to remove them all work for the NGOs.
Well, the people can remove them, but we've got to do it a different way because the court systems are so corrupt. When you look at the report on little Miss Dana Nessel here, who contributed through an NGO that she was head of, her and her wife, to the signature gatherers, we have a serious problem. But you can go outside of the court system and do it in a legal process, either pro se, jury pro prio persona, whatever is most commonly used in your state, and do it that way. But people don't have the knowledge. So we're relearning these processes again in order to actually hold them accountable, which I think is good. Well, Shawn, this is great, but I want to think I would really like you to come back on again.
Sounds good.
And so now, we've got Christmas week next week, and I don't think I'm going to do too much next week unless there's an emergency that happens. I think I might come on every day just for a little bit, but I really want to spend the time with my family too. And I know you do too, that, we want to we do this because we love the nation, but There's a lot of time that goes into this and commitment and that sort of thing. So, and I feel really strongly about it, that this is a really good thing, because I know that we're giving out the best information and the best quality information that we possibly can. And if somebody comes in here and decides to be a disruptor or somebody who is lying, I will absolutely give them the chance to talk, but then I will also give them the ass chewing of their life, and, to set the record straight. Because I also have the ability to speak, you know? And so, I mean, we don't just shy away from that just because we want to get along with everybody under all circumstances. There's times where you have to call people out. I did that this week, and I don't regret what I said. And so I think that this is it's a process, but we're really trying hard to put the truth out there as much as we can get our arms around it and have good people on. And I'd love to interview anybody you know, because your sourcing and your quality of content is just amazing. I really appreciate you a lot. It's like Bob Cushman that was on yesterday. Really appreciate very good researchers and people who are who back what they're saying with information and receipts. So with that said, would you like to say the prayer today, or would you like me to say it? I welcome you to say it.
I'll let you lead.
Okay. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so very much for this day that's ahead of us and all of the challenges as well as all the blessings that come with every day. Please help us to keep our eyes on you and not on the difficulties and the situations around us, because they lie. The situations lie, people lie. The world is full of deceit. But we don't have to let it affect us, and we don't let it affect us when we're walking with you and keeping our eyes straight on you, on Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior, every step of the way, knowing that there's a purpose for all things because you're allowing it. And we thank you that you care enough about us that you would put us that you would allow us to be in situations to help us grow, learn to handle things better, ourselves better, and just in general, learn to walk with you and become more like you. We're very thankful for that. We're thankful that you haven't turned your back on us, that you'll never leave us or abandon us or forsake us, and that you're always here with us in good times and in bad. Help us today to look at situations in our lives and not take offense to them, but to embrace them and what they have the ability to teach us. Thank you for Shawn and his family. I ask your blessings and your favor to rest mightily upon them. In all things and in all good things would just shower down on them. Same thing with Bob Cushman and Jonathan Cagle and Vicki Davis and all the other wonderful researchers who have just put so much time and effort into bringing the truth forward. We're just very, very grateful for that unwavering dedication to not only this nation, but your world. We ask that you would please help us resolve the situation with the children that are going missing, that you would give them comfort and protection, and that you would strengthen our nation to stand no matter what happens or any attacks we may be under, but that we would turn our attention to taking care of each other, not just getting more for ourselves, but that we would literally serve on this earth, in this time, this space, that we would serve you here and whatever that may be. Thank you so much for this day. We love you. You've been a great friend to us. We want to be a friend to you. In the name of Jesus Christ, we pray, amen.
Amen.
So it's that part of the program, boys and girls, do you have any last words here, Shawn?
Just remember, God's always in control. Turn your life to him, and you'll never walk alone.
There you go. And get the book of Enoch and study that a little bit. See what's going on there. You might be surprised, and it might be one of the best moves you could make. So, but with that said, and study your Bible, get in your Bible for comfort and such. There's so many wonderful things that you can do. Quite often I put on scripture that's just scripture. One of my favorite is Grace Oasis and Soak Stream on YouTube. They put out some really good videos just to sit quietly with God and listen to him. He will talk to you if you're quiet enough to listen. But with all the distractions, there's sometimes we're our own worst enemy, and putting that dividing line between ourselves and God because we're too busy and we think we're going to save the world. Well, guess what? We're not going to save the world. We can help if God asks us, but this battle is the Lord's. It's not ours. We just need not to make it worse or create more problems for it. And trust in him. So with that said, boys and girls, ding, 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 go to BrandenburgForGovernor.com, because I'm the best non-conceder who's ever not conceded in the history of the United States of America. And I would like to talk to the rightful president of the United States, President Donald J. Trump, in cowboy boots about this. And that's what all I want for Christmas is to sit down with Donald J. Trump in cowboy boots and discuss the nonsense going on. I hope you're listening. So, but I know that there's people around you who are listening. So there's the challenge, guys. Give me a great Christmas present. Anyhow, make it a great day. We're coming into a time what involves family and personalities and such. Don't let them suck you into their craziness or their drama. Just don't do it. Just be the that person that brings calm into the storm and is there to bless people, not make sure that our needs are met, but when we meet other people's needs, somehow ours get met too, which is amazing. So focus on others and treat each other the way that you would want to be treated. And I think we got this. So with that said, God bless you all. God bless all of those whom you love, and God bless America. Make it a great day. Starts here. Be tougher than the nonsense out there. And here, letting your heart lead you as God talks to you. And we will be on tomorrow with Off the Grid, probably talking about some more stuff that Shawn's talking about, and maybe even invite you back on if you want. But tomorrow we're going to be on Off the Grid at 9 o'clock, and then 10 o'clock Citizen Journal, unless you fit into both categories. So you could come on tomorrow if you'd like to, or have the time. That would be wonderful. I love talking to you. This is great. So have a great day, guys, and we will see you tomorrow. Stay on just a second, Shawn.